don't mind, before we officially get started, can I just kind of get a general idea of what brings us in today? Like, what is our interest, or what are we hoping to learn?
Just to be more educated.
Absolutely.
Why not?
I love it.
I have grandchildren that I'm interested. I don't think they do vaping, but I don't know.
And
I'd like to know more.
I have to admit that's not one of the things in my presentation, but I think we can all look back and think like there's kind of a stereotypical teen that starts smoking, right, that we were all aware of. Vaping doesn't follow that same stereotype. It kind of has its own rules, which are like no rules. So it's people that were never interested or never would have picked up a cigarette are now picking up a vape. So, I mean, definitely something to be aware of and concerned with for sure. Yeah. Anybody else? What brings you guys in? What are we hoping to find or learn?
Free lunch, don't have to go.
There you go. I love that too. Yeah. Did you have one?
Just to learn more about it, I don't know anything about it.
Absolutely. Same thing? Yeah. I'm seeing nods. Love it. So, yeah, it's important for us to be educated. You know, like we talked to about like trying to be an educated consumer. Well, even if we're not consuming these things, we might be around people that are, or just kind of to understand what is out there in the world. That's great. Hi.
Nobody ever wants the way front, right?
I know,
right? We know you don't, but.
It's okay. It's the same way like at church and everything.
Oh, yeah.
It's totally
The back always feels worse.
These are the hot seats too. They're reserved for the people that are going to answer all of my questions and come back.
Oh, you got a perfect guy right
There
there.
you go.
Perfect guy.
Get the chips out of the way first.
There we go. You're good. You're good. Okay, so if everybody is okay with it, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Is that good? Perfect. Okay. So people might keep dwindling in, and that's totally fine. I just want to start off today by thanking everybody for coming here. I kind of did a little poll before some people got in here when there was just a handful, and it seems like a lot of people are here because they understand these are like newer products, and they kind of want to understand more of what's going on with them. So I hope to answer those questions and more today. If you do have any questions, please feel free to ask. We'll have Q&A time at the end, but if something pops in and I can fit it in right there, we'll make sure we address it and everything. Because I just really want you guys to get out of this what you need to get out of this. So we're all here to take one step forward towards understanding what's happening. So my name is Loutsch. I am a health educator through Community Health Partners. We are essentially Sioux County's public health department, but I work underneath the Tobacco Use Prevention and Control grant that is provided by the state of Iowa under the Division of Tobacco. So I'm a Tobacco Use Prevention and Control Specialist, which includes nicotine products such as vapes as well too. And today we're going to talk about clearing the clouds, so understanding facts and myths about vaping and nicotine. Our work, so underneath my grant, we work on 3 main focus areas. The first one is prevention. Because if we prevent people from starting, we don't have to worry about cessation, okay? So especially youth prevention, because these products, vaping in particular, is really targeting our youth population. We'll expand that a little bit more as we go on. So we do school policies, youth education directly, educating adults that work with and influence youth, and then ISTEP chapters, we work to promote those too. Those are really kind of interesting, but it's Iowa Student Tobacco Education Program. And they're student-led and based, but they just need 1 adult volunteer per school or per program to organize and kind of be the liaison for that. Otherwise, the state sends all the materials, but it's essentially kind of like a positive peer leading group of like peer pressure in the other ways. Like, we've committed to not using tobacco. Anybody else that wants to commit to not using tobacco can kind of join our group, and you've got a support system here, kind of reversing peer pressure. So kind of a neat opportunity there. We also work to promote quitting through quit line programs, My Life, My Quit, Iowa Smoke Free Air Act, community education programs such as today, and working with building partnerships. And then my last section here is collaborative relationships. So this is a lot through coalition work, as well as community partners, healthcare, mental health, dental organizations, things of that nature. So nicotine delivery methods, there's 3 main categories. I think we're all familiar with combustibles. That's your cigarettes, cigars, pipes. So that's your leaf tobacco that contains nicotine, and it's going to be lit, and it creates smoke, and the person inhales that. The second category that we're going to focus most of today on is what's called aerosols. So that's not creating a smoke, it's creating an aerosol, similar to an aerosol that you would think of like a room freshener or hairspray. Psh, aerosol, so aerated chemicals. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. So those are your vapes or e-cigarettes, exact same product. ENDS stands for electronic nicotine delivery system, and heat no burn is kind of a little bit different. It's almost like there's like some sort of tobacco and it heats it. It doesn't start it on fire, there's no burn, there's no smoke, but it kind of like, think of a candle warmer, okay? So kind of like that sort of aspect of it, and then you're inhaling off of that. And then the third category is smokeless. So that third category is a mix between tobacco products that contain nicotine and nicotine-only products. I did skip this, I apologize. Aerosols, no nicotine only, or no tobacco, only nicotine, which is part of where we're hearing a lot of, especially our youth saying, well, these aren't bad for me. Tobacco's what's bad for me. These don't have tobacco in them. So we're talking to school professionals over and over again that are like confiscating these routines, and that's what they're being told. But these aren't bad for me because it's tobacco that's the bad thing. Not necessarily. So, okay. Familiar brands, new products. So as of 2012, the tobacco industry started getting involved in the vape industry. And when large corporations feel threatened by small corporations, they tend to do what? Buy them out, okay? And that's what started happening in 2012. So as of right now, in our country, almost every single vape company is owned by a cigarette company. So we think big tobacco, we think vape industry, kind of now interlinked, for the last 10, 11, 12 years, kind of one of the same. So they're reusing a lot of the same tactics that they used like when I was a teenager, and some of you were teenagers. So cartoons, characters, promoting stress relief and lifestyle and relaxation, and everybody else is doing it, you should do it too. Kind of so think back to those ads and stuff. So like I said, when we look at these products, they're interlinked. So the same companies that manufacture, distribute, and sell cigarettes are now the same ones that are manufacturing, distributing, and selling vapes. It's also become a saturated market. So all of these items up here are vapes. Every single one of them, okay? There are some that are large and produce huge flumes, which we might think of as smoke, but it's that flume of aerosol. There's some of them that are small and produce almost no flume. There's some of them that are like these big ones right here. Those are a tank, and they would have to open that up and refill it with e-juice that comes in like this eyedropper looking like container, okay? Other ones are disposable, which means that e-juice is just only inside of there, and once that's gone, they throw it away. And then we have the pods, which are like those teal little containers right there, and that is just that refillable sort of thing, okay? So as the vape market has expanded or evolved, they haven't really kicked out any old products. So now it kind of gets a little bit more confusing on what's a vape and what's not a vape, because they don't all look the same. We're like a cigarette, it all kind of looks the same, right? Okay? So here's kind of a timeline. The first cigarettes became mass-produced in the United States starting about 1880, and the first vape hit the market in 2007. Does anybody want to take a guess on what that first vape looked like? What does the first one look like? Why do you think they made it look like a cigarette? That was intentional. Why did they make it? Why did they want it to look like a cigarette? Okay, because it was maybe cool to smoke, or people were already smoking, right? Any other ideas?
Target cigarette smokers already.
Bingo. They were trying to target cigarette smokers because the first vapes were created to help adults that were smoking cigarettes quit smoking cigarettes. They were intended as a smoking cessation aid. And to this day, they're still kind of promoted as that, but did you guys know? It started in 2007, 17 years ago. The FDA has still never ever approved these devices as a smoking cessation device, which means there is not enough conclusive data out there to support that they will help somebody quit smoking a cigarette, okay? And this is part of the reason why. It all has to do with the nicotine content. So a pack of cigarettes has 22 to 36 milligrams of nicotine. That first vape only had 3 to 6. So if any of you have ever experienced somebody that's quitting smoking or using nicotine, stepping down gradually tends to be more effective than a cold turkey. That first vape with 3 to 6 milligrams was almost like a cold turkey event, okay? If you think back to the previous couple slides, big tobacco got involved in the vape industry in 2012. What started happening in the nicotine content? Massively increasing. So first they started purchasing because of a threat. Secondly, they saw an opportunity to increase that nicotine level because they had the science knowing if we increase nicotine level, we can increase the rate of addiction. It will happen faster and it will happen deeper. And that creates more money in their pocket, okay? But they could only get theirs up to 36 milligrams. Anything over that created a nasty, bitter taste in the back of the throat and kind of burned going down. Juul came on the market in 2015 and they introduced us to a brand new type of nicotine. That's when they were able to get theirs up to 59. So they took that tobacco nicotine that was used in cigarettes that had been used in the vapes up until that point, called free-base nicotine, and they changed the chemical pH of that nicotine, creating a nicotine salt, which then gave us the 59. Puff Bar came on in 2019. They were concerned on the FDA starting to get involved in regulating this market. So they introduced us to what's called synthetic nicotine, which is just a lab-created nicotine. Doesn't have anything to do with the plant. So created just from scratch from the lab because they thought they could skirt around the FDA regulations without them being plant-based. They were wrong. They were only on the market for like a year or two with this before the FDA got involved. But they were able to get theirs up to 79 milligrams. So if you look at that, fold that pack of cigarettes across to this puff bar. We're talking 2 to 3 packages worth of cigarettes worth of nicotine in one vape device. You waiting for the scary part? They tell us it's 350 puffs to get through a pack of cigarettes. This is a 400 puff device. So the timeline of completing that or using that product is about the same, but yet approximately 2.5 times the nicotine in it. So increasing that rate of addiction. E-juice can have high nicotine concentrations. So our local, like 911, is getting about 3,000 poison control calls every single year concerning nicotine e-juice. So those ones that need to be refilled are refilled off of these types of containers right here. They kind of look like eye droplets. They're like 2 to 6 tablespoons worth of e-juice in there. And what's happening is adults are not storing these correctly, children are getting into them. And here's the scary thing is 1 teaspoon of e-juice is strong enough to poison and kill a 26-pound child. And it's happening, okay? So if any of us have adults in our life that are using these products, we really want to urge them to secure their devices and to secure their refills and things of that nature. Even they talk about not putting them in the trash where kids are around because they can pull them out. Remembering that we can absorb nicotine from 3 ways. Inhalation, okay, through our mucous membranes in our mouth, so that's why like chew or dip works. And it actually gets absorbed through our skin, so that's how the pouch works. So we can touch that. If it's spilled on the table and we touch that, we can have that effect of the nicotine come through our pores. So children are no different. So here's some of the common symptoms of liquid nicotine poisoning. So vomiting, fast and rapid heartbeats, jittery, unsteady appearance, difficult breathing, increased saliva. So all those things are common in children with that. So Iowa usage trends. In 2011, we had this survey that was done, and it did not include vaping. So we do have to admit that because vapes were not really on the market very much. They were not really impactful in Iowa in 2011. So there wasn't really much to trace. But if you look at this, we had adults that were smoking at a rate about 21% of Iowans, adults smoke. Your teenagers were in that youth, so that's middle school, high school, and they were at about 16%. If we fast forward that to 2021, so a 10-year time difference, our cigarette users for both adult and youth dropped quite a bit. Okay, adult went down about 5-6%, youth went down like 12% in a 10-year time period. So that was pretty impressive. But then we also started measuring e-cigarettes. And does anybody find it interesting that if you look at 2021's cigarette usage for adults and youth, and you look at 2021's e-cigarette usage, they almost near each other? You guys noticing that? So, higher use in adults for cigarettes, lower use in e-cigarettes. Flip that around, vice versa there. So it's really proving and showing to us that an e-cigarette or a vape is more of a youth issue than it is an adult issue. That's where the strong consumption is coming. And then if we want to throw in national average, that's this dark blue here. So Iowa typically stands about 2 to 4% higher than the national average in nicotine consumption. So something to be aware of as well too. Okay, this one's getting a little wonky. This is a brand new thing, came out in November, but really highly impactful information. So we're gonna kind of dive into it. So the one on your left up there is high school students. The one closer to me is middle school students. So this is actually a 13-year chart of tobacco product usage. For the purpose of the day, we're just going to follow that red line on e-cigarettes, okay? So you'll notice in 2019, those e-cigarettes peaked amongst our high school students, and you can't see it on there, but that peak is at 33%. 33% of our high school students were vaping in 2019, okay? So same thing peaking for our youth, our middle school, at about 12%, once again in 2019. Notice the drastic drop in 2020 and 2021. Why? What happened in 2020? COVID. They were stuck at home with mom and dad, not around their friends, nowhere to get this from, couldn't access it. It was locked down, okay? So then we saw a huge drop in usage in 2020 and 2021 because of lack of accessibility of it, and they were constantly being supervised, okay? And then it started going back up. Here's our big concern right now in the tobacco prevention and control industry is 2022 on the high school to 2023. Great things happening here. We're seeing it go down 2, 3, 4% different states across the country. Scary thing is here. Middle school, 2022 to 2023, it's going up. Parents, grandparents, what do we think about this? We're trending down in high school, but trending up in middle school.
Well, eventually you'll see it trend up in high school too, if they're starting it in middle school.
Potentially, hopefully we've got them quitting or they're realizing the negative impact of it by then. So right now, that's what we're finding is that some of the high school students started in middle school, they're starting to find the negative impact of it. It's not working for what they thought it was gonna work for, they're starting to quit. Other ones are kind of avoiding between cost-wise and different things like that. Some of our education and prevention is starting to work more and more. So now this is a call to action. These conversations need to start younger. We went after the high school students and then the middle school students. We need to start younger, 3rd, 4th grade, easily. Prevention starts younger, okay? So what's being inhaled? It's not water vapor and it is way more than flavors, okay? So every vape is gonna have all the organic compounds in it. They're all gonna have nicotine in them, even if they're marked as nicotine-free. It's just below the required amount that the FDA requires them to report on. They're all gonna have ultrafine particles. So for those in the medical community in here, these are very interesting because vapes have only been around for 17 years. Medically wise, how long of studies do we want to be studying things for before we really understand them in a medical way? 20, 25, 30 years, right? Okay, they haven't been around long enough than that. Ultrafine particles exclusive to vape aerosol. So once again, a brand new thing. What we do know about them is since they're teeny, teeny, tiny, the smallest little things, they like to go down into those lungs, into those deep, dark crevices, and they just sit there and hang out. What tends to happen when toxins enter an organ and sit there and hang out? What does that usually lead to? The big C word, right? Okay, so possibly looking at that here as well too. 60 plus cancer-causing substances in each vape, and they all contain heavy metals like nickel, tin, lead, and also our flavors. So tons and tons of flavoring that the FDA has approved for us to eat or drink and go into our stomach never ever was meant for us to inhale, okay? So some huge differences there. For the lungs, part of that, a chunk of this is because of that flavoring. So like diacetyl is a flavoring that's directly linked to a lung condition called popcorn lung. It's in 80% of the vapes on the market right now. So we're now seeing 16 and 17-year-olds being diagnosed with popcorn lung. Irreversible lung condition, like breathing through a McDonald's straw for the rest of your life. In and out, that's all you have. There's no treatment, there's no cure, there's no reversing it. That's what it is, okay? Increased inflammation and irritation. So this is like a healthy airway right here. This is a vaporous airway. So very irritated, very inflamed, leading to shortness of breath, reduces the immune response system, so they're more likely to get sick with influenza, pneumonia, bronchitis, COVID, things of that nature. So the immune system just can't flush out those viruses and bacteria in the lungs very well. COPD can develop as well as emphysema, and EVALI, which is e-cigarette and vaping associated lung injury. So all of these things are happening. Nicotine with the heart, we're seeing an increased risk of blood clots, resting heart rate, blood pressure, decrease in circulation, and an increase in stiff blood vessels. So take a look at this. Exact same response to smokers. So it's a nicotine impact versus a cigarette impact, okay? Oral health, kind of interesting here. So the nicotine, it decreases the blood flow, and I hope you guys don't mind. I don't get to talk oral health very often, so I'm gonna have to read, so please bear with me, okay? So it negatively impacts the ability to fight infection within the mouth, decreases the ability to replenish that connective tissue, and decreased risk of gum disease and, or increased risk of gum disease and tooth loss. So the propylene glycol is part of that e-juice. So it's part of the base that makes that vape aerosol e-juice. So that is exclusive just to the vapes then, and it's toxic to the enamel of the teeth. So it starts breaking down the teeth's enamel, making these people that vape more likely to have cavities and tooth decay and things of that nature. It also decreases the amount of saliva that the people have, which then once again is increasing cavities and tooth decay. Okay, leading to dry mouth. It's made worse when consumed with sugary acidic drinks. Who tends to drink the sugary acidic drinks? our youth, right, especially like the energy drinks and things of that nature, who did we say is leaning more towards vaping? Youth. So we're looking at a lot of dental issues kind of coming out of this as well too. And it's not found in traditional tobacco products. And then the vegetable glycerin and flavorings, once again, exclusive just to the vape, so not found in your traditional tobacco products. It promotes bacteria sticking to the teeth, which are already softened from the propylene glycol. And that is increasing microbes and the growth of biofilm within the mouth as well too. And then the flavorings are found to decrease the hardness of the tooth enamel by 27%. So you start compounding these things over and over again, and what do we have? We have constant issues with dry mouth, saliva thickening, mouth sores and ulcers, cavities, and gum disease. And especially at a younger generation, people that wouldn't have normal had problems with these things. So all in all, for oral health, not a safe nicotine product out there. When it comes to the brain, this is kind of huge. Our two main reasons why we have youth telling us why they initiate the use of vaping products especially is peer pressure, feeling like everybody's doing it, they need to fit in, and coping with mental health, specifically stress, anxiety, and depression. In our youth population, those three things are at an all-time high right now. The tobacco industry knows that, and they've got social media influencers that are pushing on this hardcore right now, okay? So we have teens that are turning to these products to use them as coping for that. So essentially they're self-medicating with vapes. It's increasing anger and irritability, increasing those feelings of depression, increasing anxiety, and it's increasing their susceptibility to other addictions. So nicotine is known to prime the brain for further addiction, whether that's gambling, other substances like drugs or alcohol. So lots of addictions can kind of come out of that. It's also known to decrease impulse control, decrease decision-making or well-thought-out decision-making, so more or less they're impulsive with their decision-making, the ability to regulate their mood, pay attention, and memory, okay? So nicotine within that brain, especially with that prefrontal cortex not fully formed, so that's this highlighted area of the brain there, last part of the brain to form and develop, happens between the ages of 11 and 25. So when nicotine is introduced into that brain, it compromises what that part of the brain is setting that foundation to do, okay? So like when I work with teens, I kind of talk to them about, okay, let's think about this. Go back to kindergarten. What did every kid do in kindergarten? They got the blocks out, and they tried building a tower as high as possible, right? Now, try to build that tower on top of a pillow. How high does the tower get? Okay? So it's building a house on a faulty foundation. Essentially, we have kids that are using this as a coping mechanism, but they're damaging their foundation. So that damage that happens to the prefrontal cortex is irreversible. So we can't turn 35 years old and say, I'm going to start making good decisions, I promise. I'm willing it my way. It doesn't really work like that because the faulty foundation is there, okay? So something to be kind of concerned with as well. Nicotine and pregnancy. For a while there, we saw a trend of women turning to vapes instead of smoking while pregnant. So instead of quitting nicotine altogether while pregnant, they were switching over to vapes with the idea that it's a safer alternative. So what we do know is vaping while pregnant has the exact same impact on both mom and baby as smoking while pregnant does, okay? So it's increasing the risk of stillbirth, preterm labor, likeliness of preeclampsia, high blood pressure, low birth weight, things of that nature, okay? Once baby's born, they tend to be born with addiction or addictive tendencies, probably a little bit of brain development issues as well too, and it drastically increases their risk of SIDS. All from vaping or smoking while pregnant, okay? So the whole goal is to get them quitting before they become pregnant or at the earliest stages of when that pregnancy occurs. So once again, even at that nicotine being introduced to the person in utero, it can, once again, prime that brain for further addiction. So they might be tended towards addictive principles or actions later on in life. Okay, so here's kind of a fun little thing here. Here's the differences between cigarettes and e-cigarettes. So cigarettes, combustibles have about 7,000 calories in them, while your e-cigarettes have about 80 to 2,000. And that's such a range because once we heat these chemicals, they become a new chemical. So it's very, very hard to kind of keep track of all these, especially with all the flavoring, because all those flavors are chemically enhanced flavors, okay? Combustibles produce smoke, while those e-cigarettes produce that aerosol flume. Two different things there. Smoking has tar entering the lungs, creating that black lung that we're kind of aware of. E-cigarettes, ultrafine particles leading to inflammation, and also a greater chance of like a pink lung into a grayish lung. Okay? So, nicotine in a combustible reaches the brain in approximately 10 to 20 seconds. That e-cigarette can reach in as little as 6 seconds. So it is the fastest device to deliver a chemical to the brain that exists on the market right now. So faster than any of the medical devices like inhalers or nebulizers out there as well. Okay? Cigarettes are primarily used by adults versus e-cigarettes primarily used by youths and teens. Another interesting thing, they tell us that rate of addiction for a pack of cigarettes, so from the first inhale of a cigarette until somebody's fully addicted and going through a pack a day, is approximately 24 months. That same type of thing, 6 to 9 months for a vape. It's that large, concentrated amount of nicotine that is driving that addiction up faster, okay? Nicotine content in a combustible, 22 to 36 milligrams. In a vape, we're looking at 18 to 79 milligrams. So lots of huge differences there. Now, what about the similarities? They have similar impact on pregnancy. They both contain addictive nicotine. They have a negative impact on that youth brain development. They have a similar impact on mental health at any age. They both raise blood pressure, heart rate, and respiration rates. There's an increased chance of heart attack with both of them. Dual user. So a dual user is somebody that vapes and uses another form of nicotine. So like they vape and they smoke. So maybe they're traditionally a smoker, but they can't smoke at work and they can vape at work. So they vape at work. Okay? So a dual user is actually 6 times more likely to be diagnosed with COPD than somebody that only smokes or only vapes. 6 times. Okay? And they have secondhand impact on others. We're going to explore that a little bit more in the next couple slides here, as well as third-hand impact. Does anybody know, how many of you guys know what third-hand impact is? It's kind of a new thing, I have to admit. I've been doing this job for about 2 years now. No idea what it was before I started. This is kind of a newer thing. And as with all nicotine and tobacco products, you have to be 21 to purchase. So yeah, it used to be 18. Nationwide, they went up to 21 about 4 years ago. So it's an entire across the country, right there. Secondhand smoke, secondhand vape. So we're all pretty familiar with what secondhand smoke is, right? Somebody's sitting in the room next to us, we're riding in a car, you know, back in the day, the smoking section at the restaurant versus the non-smoking section of the restaurant, right? Who did that fool? That was kind of a little interesting, right? Okay. We just put like a little pony wall up and the smoke can't cross. That's okay. We'll live in bliss for a long time there, but yeah. So that's essentially when somebody's actively doing it around us. We're in a close proximity to them, even if it is outdoors. So with that, same thing with a vape. So that flume aerosol that comes off of that vape still contains those chemicals that weren't absorbed and inhaled by the person, okay? So when they're exhaling that, they're exhaling the residue and what's left of that they didn't take on. So anybody around them could be breathing that in or absorbing any of those as well too, okay? So it can be inhaled by bystanders. It actually can travel through air vents and ductwork, which makes this particularly concerning for people that live in like multifamily dwellings, so apartments, condos, things of that nature. So even if you're not smoking in your house and you're trying to protect your family from it, your neighbors could be, and it could be coming through the ductwork, or even if you share a wall, it can come through the sheetrock and dwell into that. It's pretty crazy. There's no safe level of exposure to secondhand smoke. It also creates an increased risk in children, like particularly like asthma, allergies, severity of asthma attacks and frequency with those as well too. And it's linked to about 45,000 deaths per year. That's kind of a lot, right? Third hand essentially is when the activity of smoking or vaping is not happening around us. So we're in this room right now. And just pretend for the sake of this slide, somebody in here was either smoking or vaping before we got in here. It could have even been a couple hours before, okay? So that has all gone up in the air, and now it's heavy and it falls down. So it's gonna be landing on our tabletops, on our carpet, on our textiles, our curtains, furniture, things of that nature, okay? Even on like tiles, linoleums, things of that, okay? And so we can come back later on and we can pick that up. Because remember, our nicotine can be absorbed through the skin. So we can kind of touch that, and that can have an influence on us. The other thing a lot of people don't really realize with third hand, because we see a lot of times, like especially in daycare centers, somebody that smokes or vapes, but they go outside to do it. And then they come back and they snuggle the little babies. Okay? So third hand, since it clings to textiles, it's still on their clothing. It's in their hair, and it's on their skin and like their fingernails. Third hand, this is where it gets really crazy. We can't wash it away. We can decrease it, but like say for instance, like somebody buys they buy a house, new to them, and they come in and somebody has been smoking in it or whatnot, right? What do? We repaint the walls, we wash the carpet, clean the carpet, so we call it good. Within 6 months, that nicotine can come back through that fresh paint and through the carpet cleaning. Within 6 months, and be like you didn't do anything. How crazy is that? I was watching a webinar, and they were doing some testing in California, and in this one apartment complex, the nicotine level was so high in the wall, they had to take it down to the studs in order to get rid of it. Now, how many landlords do you know are going to take their drywall down to the studs for the safety of the next person coming in? Okay, so something to kind of be aware of. Primarily a big issue for our little kids, infants, and our pets. Because they're like pets, their noses are down right at these surfaces, and our little children, maybe they're crawling, and then they like to put their hands in their mouth and stuff too, so that just kind of adds to it. Okay. So another thing we want to make you guys aware of is, what if I was to tell you, one of these devices up here is a nicotine device, another device contains THC, which is weed or marijuana. And another one of the devices has meth in it. Could you tell them apart? Which one's which? You can't tell. So what's happening is our devices are being tampered with. And they're being tampered with and they're being sold to our youth. Because youth can't walk into a store like Quick Start and pick these up, they have to be 21. So they're more likely to get them from a source called an informal source, maybe a friend or an older family member or something like that. If they're getting them from a friend, middle school students, more likely to go through 3 to 5 people's hands before they end up in that middle school student's hand, usually out of the package. And it doesn't take a whole lot to tamper with these, but here's the crazy thing is, it doesn't change anything. They look exactly alike, they smell exactly alike. The only way to know they've been tampered with is to use it and become sick or even worse. So in Northwest Iowa, we have seen vapes with meth in them, with THC in them, and with fentanyl in them. There is no way to know. There's no light that blinks. Nobody puts a banana, like a sticker on them, like the organic bananas at the grocery store, so you know the difference. There's no way to tell, okay? So with that too, if you guys are ever anywhere and you find a vape, I caution you about picking it up without a gloved hand. Just because if it's leaking or whatever, you have no idea what was in it. Any of that stuff can be absorbed through the skin. So just something to have to aware of. Also, since they are the same device, it is much easier for our youth to upgrade. Remember, nicotine primes the brain for further addiction or other addictions. So it takes not very much effort to take that same device and turn it into a cannabis device. It can be the same smell, same taste, same everything, exact same device, so same feel, different result. So just kind of keep that in mind too. Our targeted groups, we're seeing huge targets between the LGBTQ community. They're twice as likely to be using tobacco products or nicotine products than their straight peers. Women have been specifically targeted for decades. Slim, stress relief, lifestyle, feeling cool. Our mental health community, did you guys know that 40% of the cigarettes used in the United States are consumed by people with mental health diagnosis? 40%. And here's the scary thing is, nicotine tends to clash with a lot of mental health prescription medications. So it can have a negative impact on how their prescription is working within them. Lower income, lower education level is also targeted. minority communities, so much so that big tobacco has reduced the prices in predominantly Black communities and Latino communities to try to get them addicted to nicotine products. And our teens, which we've already kind of talked about. So why are youth using? Since they're kind of our primary group that's kind of going after the tobacco and vape industry is going after. 4 main reasons. The first one is peer pressure. And we have to remember our youth's peer pressure is completely different than what we grew up with. Our peer pressure were the people that we shared our classroom with, the people that we were on sports teams with, our neighbors, our relatives, maybe a Teen Bop magazine, right? Or something like that we saw when we were younger, okay? Their peer pressure also includes social media influencers. People that they welcome into their bedrooms over social media on a tablet or a computer or their phone. And the scary thing is big tobacco spends $1 million a day. $1 million a day advertising to our youth, predominantly ages 13 through 18 years old, through social media influencers. Because they can no longer actively advertise vape products on the TV or any of those sort of things, so they pay social media influencers. And Juul, that's part of where Juul lost their credit from, was they were paying adults to act and dress like teenagers and post things on social media so that these kids felt like these were their peers. And that's what was part of the luring in, okay? The next thing is the coping with mental health, specifically stress, anxiety, and depression. That's probably the number one reason why they're turning to it. And the flavors. The vape industry likes to use flavors within their products that are very youthful. Candy, fruit, pop flavors, mint flavors, okay? They're not using flavors that hit us. Like, if you wanted me, it has to come in dark chocolate. Maybe some cheesecake and some peppermint mocha and things of that nature. That's not what they're doing. They're doing candy flavors, they're doing popcorn, they're doing like Fanta grape and orange and things of that nature. When was the last time any of you guys had a Fanta? They're not an adult flavor, they're youthful flavors. And when those youth see these flavors, they say, my grandma buys me a Fanta when we go to the movies. This is safe. My school sells me popcorn at a concession stand. This is safe. So when it feels safe, it feels normal. When it feels normal, it feels like we're all good to go, okay? So they're playing off that. How are youth getting them? This is where it also gets interesting. They're getting them from adults, including some of their very own parents. So we have parents out there that feel like, I did way dumber things when I was their age. And if I buy them for them, I know where they came from, I know what's in them, okay? They're also getting them from other adults in exchange for services. So it's a two-way street here. A, we have adults that are offering to pay our teens in vapes instead of cash to do things like babysitting, lawn care, and snow removal. We also have teens that are asking to be paid in vapes versus cash. So it's kind of a two-way street. Once again, not really understanding what is in them and what they're doing to them. The next group is their peers or older students. So teens are getting them from other teens. And like I said, those middle school students in particular, usually 3 to 5 hands they're going through, and they're usually out of the package. So it might just look like this. Okay, this is my clicker. But I guess I have just handing them a vape. What's been done to it, how much is actually in there. I was working with a police officer not too long ago, and he said he had a 7th grader he confiscated a vape from, and the kid started crying because he paid $40 for that vape. Retail value was $7. Okay. So other peers and retailers. So retailers kind of fall into 2 spots. The primary ones we're seeing issues with are like vape shops and small gas stations. Like they're not always checking ID, they're not always regulated. Your Casey's, your Quick Stars, your Hy-Vees, they have a lot to lose by failing a what do they call it, like the stings of like the minors going in and purchasing in assistance with the police department and stuff. So those tend to be not as big of a deal, but like your mom and pop gas stations or the vape stores and things of that nature, they tend to kind of skirt underneath the radar a little bit more. But the bigger issue here is actually online. So much so that CDC's recent poll showed that about 30% of teen vapes are coming from online retailers. And this is how they're doing it. They're asking for prepaid gift cards or credit cards for like birthdays or Christmas, or they're going into like Hy-Vee and buying like the Visa or MasterCards, the prepaid ones off the rack. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Okay. So they're using that to have a credit card to purchase them online. And then they're taking like mom and dad's driver's license and like their birth date and stuff like that, and they're submitting that. But here's the fun thing is, in the state of Iowa, we do not require you to be, or we do not require a signature upon arrival through the mail for tobacco and nicotine products. So like if I was to order alcohol through a mail service, I'd have to have somebody at my house signing for it that had a valid 21 ID, or they would not leave it there. Tobacco and nicotine, not the same thing. Does not require a signature, does not require that valid ID. So they're getting the notifications of like tracking the packages sent to their phones, intercepting them before mom and dad come home. And here's the scary thing with this, is if they're going through and they're doing it through an online retailer, they're not ordering one. They're ordering like 20, and then they're taking them to school and they're selling them. So it's kind of empowering others. Okay, so signs that a youth you know might be vaping. So we're noticing changes in behavior, especially reducing in caffeine, because that resting heart rate of somebody that's hitting a vape, 120 to 150 beats per minute, just sitting still. You guys in here is probably around 70. To get mine up to 120, 150, I'm gonna have to go run a mile or two, okay? So just to kind of put that in perspective. So adding caffeine to that, very jittery, very wiry, not really working, and to get that calm, euphoric feeling like what traditionally tobacco might or nicotine might provide for a person. So they're reducing their caffeine intake, experiencing frequent nosebleeds, and usually an unstable mood as well too. They also may have an unusual USB charger, something that looks different than a phone charger, maybe looks like it kind of has like a cup or a dish that it's sitting in, and different school supplies. So we don't have that slide on here, but we're seeing a lot of school supplies like highlighters, pens, markers, things of that nature, that are being functionally created where they work as a pen, and then the other side is a vape. So they can like literally vape off of, and so they're like writing with it in school and then hitting it right there, and teachers and parents don't know because they look like functional school supplies. So if they have different school supplies, also if there's disposable devices or pods in the trash, or there's unusual smells, especially sweet or minty smells, in rooms or clothing or in their car, things of that nature, that might be a sign they're using as well too. So, kind of to sum it up, vaping right now in our teen market or in our country is essentially the perfect storm. Younger initiation age, really, really being promoted. Juul was found guilty of specifically targeting 11 to 17-year-olds. 11 to 17-year-olds, okay? So younger initiation age is being pushed, higher nicotine concentration, you add those two things together and we have a faster, deeper addiction rate. Think that 24 months for combustible cigarettes, 6 to 9 months for vaping, okay? So what do we do to help? Quitline Iowa is a free service available for those 18 and over. Some awesome things with Quitline Iowa. They're 100% free, 100% confidential. They offer quit assist counseling, one-on-one over the phone, online chat, email, things of that nature. They also offer nicotine replacement therapy for a minimum of 2 weeks. So 2 weeks is the standard. If the person that is enrolled in this, if their insurance company doesn't cover or they're underinsured or have no insurance, they can kind of help work with them on prolonging that out so they're more likely to stay quit. They also have special programs like behavioral health and pregnancy and teen programs and things of that nature. My Like My Quit is the teen version of that, specifically for 12 to 17-year-olds. Once again, completely free, completely confidential. They do not offer nicotine replacement therapy because nicotine replacement therapy is not studied on minors, and also they would need parental consent to give somebody else's child medication. And they don't contact the parents or the schools. So this is 100% confidential between the youth that enrolls in the program and the people that work in the program. Now, I have a 12-year-old. And when I first heard this, they don't contact the parents, I kind of got a little bit on edge. Like, my kid was enrolled in this program. I want to know. And then I had to think to myself, Angela, calm down. If my child is struggling and anybody else is able to help them, isn't it more important that they get the help they need? Because teens are more likely to go to a program like this because they don't contact the parents or the school. If they go to the school or they go to the parents, they're afraid they're going to get in trouble. And that's why some of them aren't reaching out for help when they know they really need help, okay? So a free program like this can kind of open the doors to start the conversation, and then mom and dad can kind of edge in later on down the line. This usually takes about 8 weeks to complete. So essentially, I want to remind you guys, there is no such thing as a safe tobacco product, especially for our youth, mostly due to that brain development and what else it can do to the body. Each one of you have this handout on yours. I just find this really, really fascinating because like my dad smoked for 37 years, and this right here just goes on to prove that it is never too late to quit using tobacco or nicotine products, okay? So these things can start very early on and almost immediately. Who has questions, comments, concerns, anything we want to share or further discuss? Yeah.
Do you know when it's a no smoking place of business or workplace, is vaping allowed then, even if, I mean, if they see it, I mean, do you see that there's a lot of that it's okay to vape in public places that you won't be able to smoke?
That is a great question, and if it's okay for you, for everybody that's on the live stream, I'm going to repeat questions in the microphone so they get them as well too. So she's asking for no smoking establishments that have the no smoking signs. Are we seeing people that are vaping within those establishments? Like more or less, is it okay? Kind of what do we do? So here's the fun thing with that. With the Clean Air Act that Iowa initiated about 15 years ago, that took all combustible things. So that's cigarettes, cigars, pipes, anything that you're going to light and it's going to create a smoke, right? So that made all of our workplaces, all of our restaurants, everything went smoke-free, right? Fun fact, the smoke-free or the Clean Air Act does not include electronic devices. It also does not include smokeless tobacco or any of those that were in that smokeless category. Guess who knows that? This is a law that's been in effect for 15 years and we're just now getting the answers to it in this room. Guess who knows it? The vapors. Okay? So they know that although going to the county fair is a smoke-free environment, they can still vape. Okay? It is up to each individual establishment at this time if they want to include vaping in on that policy. Okay? So they can do what's called a comprehensive policy, making their establishment completely tobacco-free and nicotine-free, which would include all combustibles. So go back to that slide with all 3 categories on there. Everything on there would not be allowed in their establishment. That is one thing that we do work to help with, so we can provide all those signs for free. We can help with standardized policies that's going to hold up in a court, or, you know, they don't always need to go to court, but like staffing policies for the staff to sign, or kind of inviting guests and things of that nature. So those would kind of look like. Here's my big one. So this goes like on parks or outsides of buildings and schools. So there's a cigarette, a vape, and then like a can of smokeless tobacco product. And so it's essentially saying that this is a tobacco-free, nicotine-free ground. So once again, these are all available. Window clings, stickers, metal signs. I can get them from the state for absolutely no cost to any business or any organization or establishment. So if you have anybody that's interested in those, just give them my contact information. Email address is right up there. We'll get them hooked up. Any other questions? Yeah.
Someone who's been smoking, you can kind of smell it. Does vaping leave that a smell too? You know, if someone comes in from vaping, do you know that they're vaping? Or?
Okay, so the question is when somebody's smoking, they usually have that smoker's kind of smell on them as vaping, kind of the same thing. It's going to be more of, you'll smell the flavor in which they're using. So maybe they're using like a raspberry freeze or whatever, which, by the way, anything that has freeze or ice in the name, like a strawberry ice or watermelon freeze, that means it's a menthol product. So that's kind of like usually kind of skirting around. Or typically that means, I should say, I'm sorry, that's not 100% perfect, but typically it means it's a menthol product, okay? So you're going to smell either that high fruit concentration or like the high mint. So I'm not gonna lie, I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s. What did we do in the 80s and the 90s? We went to Bath and Body Works. And we got the little body sprays. And all the girls' bathrooms in every high school and middle school smelled like what? Bath and Body Works overload. Correct? True or false? Okay, she's not, she's my generation back there, I see it, okay? So that's the one thing is I have friends that are teachers, and even talking to some of the other schools, they're like, it went from being like vanilla body spray and everything to then you walk in and you're like, okay, this smells slightly different, but it's still vanilla. And so then you just kind of know that it's, you know, it just smells a little off than what a typical body spray would. But yeah, usually strong flavors, especially if they were in an enclosed area. Mm-hmm. Yes?
The price compared to vaping and cigarettes?
That's a really great question. She asked, how does the price compare to vaping and cigarettes? So I'm going to come back over for some visual aids. I brought some samples. We have inventory of these, so please don't feel like we want to take any of them or whatnot. But I have 3 different vape devices here. And on the tops, they actually say how much they retail for. And then I have 2 different, these are pouches. So this is kind of an emerging product amongst our teenagers. They increased in retail sales by 600% between 2019 and 2022. So in a 3-year time period, the sales of these increased by over 600%. And they're just a nicotine pouch, so there's no tobacco in them, but those are marked as well on there. So our vapes, depending upon how many puffs they are. So like this one here, this is a Breeze, and it is a 2,000 puff device. It's $20 for 2,000 puffs, okay? But then this one is Abuse, and it sells for, the device sells for $9.99, and the pods that you would refill with the e-juice in there, they're $5, and this is a 400 puff device. So the initial thing would be like $15 to start and then $5 to keep going with it. So, and that's gonna be like, that pod would be about similar to what a pack of cigarettes would be like time frame wise of consumption. So honestly, in a pack of cigarettes, probably usually around like $7. So you're looking at puff to puff, not very much off on price wise, pretty close. So we usually tell teens too is, the tobacco industry knows that if they can get them addicted to nicotine by the age of 19 years old, statistically it is more likely to take them 20 years to quit. 20 years. So based off of the current vape prices right now, you're looking at about $50,000 or $50,000 minimum in that 20-year time period directly out of that teen's pocket and into Big Tobacco's pocket. $50,000. So then my other question is like, what could you do with $50,000? There's always somebody that says Fortnite, and there's always somebody that says a vacation, and I'm going with whoever's doing a $50,000 vacation, I'm just saying. So, yeah, did that answer your question? Yeah, it honestly kind of depends on what brand you're doing and whether it's disposable or reusable. Okay? Yeah, any other questions? So I guess I'll ask you guys, let's do a poll. So who now thinks that vaping is safer than smoking? We'll flip it back around. Who thinks that smoking is safer than vaping? Right? We're getting a little hee-haw here. Okay, so a couple weeks ago I was in a middle school, and I had a middle school boy come to me and he says, Angela, I know that smoking is safer than vaping. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna roll with this. How so? Like, give me your logic and your reasoning. We know what happens to you when you smoke. We know the end result. We know if you do it for this long, it's probably going to lead to this and this and this, whatever. We know. Vaping, we don't know. It's too young to really have a full understanding. You can say, like, if I vape for 5 years when I'm a teenager, what is my brain going to look like 20 years down the line? What's my lungs going to look like when I'm 40 or 50? We don't know because they're not old enough. These products haven't been around long enough for us to have this research and this data. It doesn't exist. So one of the things we talk to our teens about too is choosing products like vapes. You're choosing to be a guinea pig because there's so much we just don't know. We have a lot of research. It's one of the most researched items out there, but there's so much we still just don't know. So when I have a youth ask me, Angela, is it safer to vape or to smoke? This is my response. Now, I have been lectured many times through my life that we don't answer a question with a question, but I'm busting through that on this one, okay? So when somebody asks me that, I usually say, well, let me ask you this. What do you think is safer? Riding on the hood of a car or riding on the roof of a car? And usually there's some sort of argument over, like, if you go on the hood, you got the ledge by the windshield wiper. Or do you need help on the windshield? You know, like, it's teen logic. I love teen logic. It's like one of my favorite things out there. And then always there's like this quiet gal that's over in the corner that just sneaks up and raises her hand and goes, isn't there like another option? Like, why can't you just run inside the car? And I'm like, that's what I'm asking you too. Is there another option between smoking and vaping? Yeah, we just don't use it, because one thing is, we gotta remember, nobody ever starts a product like this expecting or hoping to become addicted. We don't take our first hit of a cigarette or our first hit of a vaping and go, yes, let's do it today. I want to dive into an addiction and spend $50,000 over how many years and like have this be my focal and everything smell and my health be compromised and stuff like that. Nobody ever starts that hoping for an addiction. They're hoping for something else, but not an addiction, okay? But here's the one thing about addiction. We have to learn to quit. At one point or another in your life, you have to learn to quit it. Guess what you can't do in a nursing home? You can't smoke. So if you've been a smoker for 60 years and you go to a nursing home, you gotta learn how to quit. Guess what? Now you can't do it on an airplane. You can't smoke or vape. Vaping is now counted as smoking on airplanes, so tampering with a laboratory or vaping on an airplane, exact same thing, same punishment. So, I mean, it's one of those things, we gotta really remember that. If we don't start, we never have to learn how to quit. And that goes for chocolate as well, too. I mean, I know we're all too late on that, but I'm just letting you guys know, if you don't start, we don't have to learn how to quit. So, any other questions? Well, you guys have been more than amazing today. I really, really sincerely appreciate your time. And here's my challenge to you. If you found any of this information impactful, or any of it seemed really new, and I don't want to use the word shocking, but just kind of different to you, feel free to share it with other people. Because if you didn't know, what's the chances they knew it? Okay? Honestly, feel free to share it. Because the whole thing is which one of the reasons our kids are getting them? Because of adults like us that don't know how dangerous they can be and the impact that they can have on youth, being willing to purchase them for them. So if we educate more of the adults, we protect our youth. So I thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.